My husband told me he was working late again, so I packed his favorite dinner and showed up at his office. Through the glass wall, I saw him feeding cake to his assistant while whispering something that made her giggle. When I walked in, they both went pale. I just smiled and said, "Don't worry, you'll both be getting served, and not just dinner." I was standing in the hallway of the Merrill and Carter office building in downtown Charlotte, holding a stupid little Tupperware container of honey garlic chicken I'd made because my husband, Mark, had another late night. The whole place was quiet except for the low hum of HVAC and the click of my shoes on the polished floor. His office had those floor-to-ceiling glass walls, modern, open, collaborative, all the corporate buzzwords he used whenever he bragged about his job. I figured he'd be stressed, maybe exhausted, maybe grateful for the surprise. I even rehearsed a dumb line in the elevator, something like, "Thought you could use a real meal." I was nervous because lately things felt off. He'd been more distant at home, spending hours scrolling his phone in the bathroom, and every time I asked if something was wrong, he'd say, "It's just work." But what I saw through that glass snapped something inside me so fast it left a ringing in my ears. Mark was sitting on the edge of his desk, turned toward his assistant, Jenna, this bubbly 26-year-old he'd hired 6 months ago. She was perched on his office chair, laughing, her cheeks pink. And in his hand was a fork with a piece of chocolate cake on it. He lifted it slowly, playfully, and she opened her mouth like they were in some bad rom-com. He fed it to her while leaning in to whisper something. She giggled, this soft, breathy sound I hadn't heard from anyone since I was in college, let alone coming from someone eating a grocery store cake with a married man. I didn't even remember grabbing the door handle. I just walked in. Both their heads snapped toward me. Jenna froze with her hand halfway to her mouth, and Mark's face drained so fast he looked like someone had unplugged him. His lips parted, but nothing came out. I stayed completely calm, too calm, honestly. I placed the container of food on the nearest table like I was delivering catering. My voice came out steady, almost cheerful. "Don't worry," I said. "You'll both be getting served, and not just dinner." The silence in the room went thick. Mark stood up too fast, knocking a stack of folders to the floor. Jenna pushed her chair back so hard it rolled into the wall. Baby, wait, this isn't," he started, but I held up my hand. I didn't want his excuses. I didn't want to hear him stutter through whatever lie he had stored away for moments like this. My brain wasn't even processing the cheating yet. I was stuck on this weird detail. The cake. That stupid slice of chocolate cake with the little frosting rose on top. Mark hated chocolate cake. He always said it made his throat itch. He always complained when I baked it. So why the hell was he feeding it to her? And why was she acting like they'd done this 100 times? I scanned the room, taking in the messy desk, the extra mug next to his coffee machine, the jacket of his I hadn't seen him wear in months draped over the back of her chair. All these tiny details clicked together like they'd been waiting for me to notice. Something in my chest tightened, but I kept my smile. It scared Mark more than if I'd screamed. "I'm not here to fight," I said softly. "I'm just here to watch you both try to explain what comes next." Their eyes widened, Jenna's especially. She looked like she suddenly realized she wasn't just in a flirty office moment. She was in trouble. But the real shock came when Mark opened his mouth again, shoulders shaking slightly, and muttered something I absolutely did not expect, something that hit me harder than seeing them together. And that's where everything in my life flipped. I wish I could say I didn't see it coming. But the truth is, I'd been noticing the cracks in our marriage for years and just buried them under routines, sarcasm, and too many I'm fine-s. Mark and I met in college at UNC Charlotte. He was charming, had that easy smile that made everyone trust him instantly. I was head over heels from day one. He was the guy who called me at 2 a.m. just to say he missed me, who remembered my coffee order better than I did, who made me believe we'd be together forever. We got married when I was 25, he was 27, and for the first few years it was perfect. Too perfect, in hindsight. We had our fights, of course, but they were small. Arguments about whose turn it was to do dishes, what show to binge watch, or whether we could actually afford that trip to Asheville. Nothing major. I'd wake up in the morning, and he'd be next to me, coffee in hand, and for a moment, everything was exactly as it should be. Then came the shift. I think it started around the time he got promoted to project manager at Merrill and Carter. I was thrilled for him. He deserved it. But suddenly, he was working longer hours, networking late nights, and always had his phone glued to his hand. At first, I bought it. I told myself, he's stressed, he's building a career, it's temporary. But the little things started to add up. He'd come home smelling faintly like someone else's perfume or cologne. He'd laugh at texts when I wasn't around, and I'd catch him texting on his phone in the bathroom and muttering, "Not now," under his breath. Once, I asked to see his calendar for the week, and he froze, fumbled, and said, "It's all work stuff, trust me." That was the first time I realized trust alone wasn't enough anymore. I tried talking to him, I really did. I'd ask how things were at work, who he had lunch with, what projects he was proud of. He'd smile, nod, and answer in vague, polite terms. He never lied outright, but the pauses, the hesitation, they told me everything I didn't want to hear. Still, I ignored the little alarms. Maybe I didn't want to believe it. Maybe I was scared. Or maybe I thought that being a good wife meant looking the other way until I had proof. And I did have proof, just not until that night, walking into his office with a container of chicken, seeing him feed chocolate cake to Jenna like he was dating her instead of me. What made it sting even more was how comfortable they looked together, like this wasn't some stolen, secret moment. They were used to this. And I'd been blind, pretending everything was fine while my husband built this double life, one lie at a time. I don't even know why I decided to go to the office that night. Part of me wanted to catch him, part of me wanted to believe he'd come clean on his own. But the instant I walked in and saw them both pale as sheet, I knew that what I thought was a minor betrayal was actually a full-blown, carefully orchestrated affair. And in that second, standing there with the smell of warm chicken in my hands and the sight of their frozen faces, I realized I was about to change everything, starting tonight. The thing is, I wasn't just mad. I was calm. Too calm. Like I'd been rehearsing this exact moment in my head for months without even realizing it. After that night at the office, everything changed, but nobody knew it yet. Not Mark, not Jenna, not even me fully. The next few days felt like I was living in some alternate universe. I kept seeing him, the way he'd avoid my eyes, the way his tone got sharper when he thought I didn't notice, the way Jenna would smirk when she thought he wasn't paying attention. I could almost taste the arrogance in the air, like they were daring me to catch on fully. I didn't confront him immediately. That would have been too easy, too messy, and honestly, I wanted him to feel it. So I played the part of the unsuspecting wife. I acted normal at home, dinner, small talk, Netflix. I smiled. I laughed. I even kissed him good morning, pretending I hadn't walked into his little chocolate cake show. Inside, though, I was calculating every move, replaying that scene in his office like it was etched into my memory. Every detail mattered. The way she leaned back in his chair, the way he whispered something that made her giggle, the little frosting rose on that cake. Then came the subtle escalation. I started showing up unexpectedly in his world, just enough for him to feel watched. Lunches at his favorite spots, casual drive-bys of the office building, pretending to be on a call while peeking through the glass walls. Every time I saw them together, my chest tightened, but I didn't lose control. I observed. I collected information. I learned their patterns. Jenna always left at 6:15, he always lingered to finish emails. The way they used project deadlines as excuses for private meetings. The most infuriating part, he still acted normal at home, like nothing had changed. Like he was walking on eggshells only to cover up the fact that he'd been sneaky for months. I realized then that his fear wasn't about being caught. It was about me seeing the damage I could do if I decided to. I started small. I'd send mistaken texts from my phone to his, showing up in places they'd planned to meet. I'd casually mention project names or client meetings, watching him panic when I named people he hadn't told me about. It wasn't revenge yet, not really, but it was a warning. It was letting him know I knew, and that I wasn't going to be silent. At home, I began quietly reclaiming space. Little things, organizing his work closet, cleaning out old files, rearranging schedules. He noticed, of course. He asked questions. I just smiled, making it clear I was harmless, and he swallowed his panic because he thought I was still the wife who trusted him blindly. But the tension was building. Every lie he told, every excuse he gave, every glance toward Jenna, it was feeding a fire I hadn't lit yet, but that was burning hot inside me. I could see it in his eyes. He knew I was different now. He could feel it. He just didn't know how far I was willing to go. And then, one night, after he stayed late working again, I found something that changed everything. A piece of evidence that I didn't just know about the affair. I had proof. Physical proof. It wasn't just betrayal anymore. It was leverage. I smiled quietly to myself in the dark, realizing that I had all the pieces I needed. The only question left was how far I was willing to push. The proof I found wasn't a text, or an email, or a love note tucked somewhere stupid like the glove compartment. It was something worse, something bold, something that made it clear this wasn't just an affair. It was a whole plan behind my back. It happened 3 nights after the cake incident. Mark took a late shift again, so I decided to go through the drawer in our hallway, the one he always used for work receipts and random papers. I wasn't looking for anything specific. I just had this gut feeling that if he'd been sloppy enough to feed cake to another woman at his office, he'd be sloppy enough to leave evidence somewhere stupid. And oh, he did. Folded neatly in a white envelope were 2 printed copies of a lease agreement for an apartment in South End. One of the new luxury buildings with rooftop fire pits, yoga studios, all the flashy crap he always pretended not to care about. My stomach dropped as I scanned the page. The lease started next month. The unit was a 1-bedroom. The primary tenant listed in bold was Mark J. Halston, and right beneath it, in the co-tenant section, written in clean, confident signature, Jenna R. Sutton. I just stared at it numb. Not only was he cheating, he was literally about to move out. Start a new life. Build a home with her while still kissing me goodnight and asking if I'd remembered to buy more almond milk. He'd been planning this, saving for this, acting like we were fine while setting up his escape route behind my back. The kind of betrayal that doesn't happen by accident. My ears rang. My chest squeezed so tight I had to sit down on the floor like my legs forgot how to work. The paper shook in my hands. That's when I noticed something else tucked behind the lease, another sheet. A printout of divorce papers. Unsigned but already filled out. My name typed perfectly. Our assets listed. His preferred division, he wanted the house. The house I'd renovated. The house I'd bought furniture for, painted, cleaned, made a home. The house my mother helped us with a down payment for. And in the section for reason for dissolution, he'd typed, irreconcilable differences, spouse's emotional instability. I swear I felt my heartbeat stop for a second. That's when everything clicked. All the distant behavior, all the coldness. All the nights he came home annoyed at nothing. The sudden criticism. The way he'd started asking if I was doing okay mentally. The way he'd phrase things like, I'm worried you're becoming paranoid. He wasn't just having an affair. He was building a case. He wanted to paint me as unstable, so he could walk out clean, with the house, with her, with everything. I sat on the floor for a long time, holding the papers in my lap. Something in me snapped, but not the way he probably expected. Not the screaming, sobbing breakdown he was preparing to weaponize. Instead, my mind went cold, sharp, focused. He thought he knew who I was. He thought he had the upper hand. He thought he'd get to rewrite the story, make me the villain, walk away with a shiny apartment and a shiny assistant and a clean reputation. He had no idea what I was capable of when pushed this far. I folded the papers back into the envelope, slid it into my purse, and stood up. My hands weren't shaking anymore. My voice wasn't trembling. This wasn't heartbreak. This was clarity. I didn't sleep that night. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling while Mark snored beside me like he hadn't just submitted me for the Unstable Wife of the Year award. Every now and then, he'd roll over and drape an arm across me, and I'd have to fight the urge to peel his hand off like it was something rot. By morning, I had a plan clear, controlled, and more patient than anything I'd ever done in my life. Revenge wasn't going to be loud. It wasn't going to be emotional. It was going to be methodical. I started by making copies of everything: his secret lease, his unsigned divorce papers, emails between him and Jenna I pulled from his laptop once he left for work. He was sloppy with that too. Didn't log out. Didn't clear drafts. Didn't even delete the automated rent confirmation email from the luxury building in South End. I forwarded it all to a brand new email account only I knew about. Then I scheduled an appointment with a divorce lawyer, one who specialized in high asset protection and had a reputation in Charlotte for being a shark with a smile. When I walked into her office, she offered me a seat and asked what brought me there. I pulled out the envelope and set it on her desk. She flipped through the papers, her expression going from neutral to mildly amused to downright predatory. "You have leverage," she said simply. "A lot of it. And he has no idea you know." "None," I said. "Good," she replied. "We'll keep it that way." Next step, financials. I began moving my money into a separate account. Not in a panicked way, but slow and steady, so it wouldn't trigger any alerts. My lawyer told me exactly how much I could shift legally. I followed her instructions to the letter. I also froze the joint credit card, claimed I lost it. He barely noticed, just mumbled something about using Apple Pay. Good, let him. Then came the part that took the most patience, gathering witnesses. People who had seen him and Jenna together in ways that weren't professional. His coworkers weren't loyal to him, they liked Jenna more, but they weren't loyal to her either. A few carefully worded conversations, a few jokes about young assistants and their bosses, and suddenly everyone wanted to talk. I didn't push. I didn't dig, I just listened. By the end of the week I had statements, screenshots, photos, even a video from a coworker who caught Mark touching Jenna's lower back at a bar during a team night out. You'd think if you were planning to leave your wife, you'd be discreet. Not my husband. He wanted to play house before he even ended hours. But my favorite piece of evidence came from a member of the building staff at that fancy South End apartment. I went there pretending to be a potential tenant. I asked about the neighborhood, the amenities, the noise level. Then casually, like it meant nothing, I said, "My husband and I were thinking of moving into a unit with some friends of ours, Mark and Jenna. They said they signed a lease here." The staffer's face lit up. "Oh, yes, the couple in Unit 712. They toured together, seemed really excited." The couple. That was the moment something deep inside me clicked into place. Not anger, not heartbreak, resolve. By the time I walked out of that building, the revenge plan was fully formed. Clean, surgical, devastating. I wasn't going to ruin just the affair. I wasn't going to ruin just his plans. I was going to ruin the entire fantasy life he thought he'd walk into untouched. And the first strike was coming sooner than he expected. The next day, I found something I wasn't supposed to find, something that didn't just change my plan, but ripped the rug out from under the entire situation. It happened completely by accident. Mark left for work early, rushing out the door like he was late for a flight instead of a 9 a.m. meeting. I heard the garage door close, waited a full minute, then walked into the kitchen to make coffee. That's when I noticed it, his work bag sitting by the pantry. He never forgot that bag, not once in our entire marriage. It was basically an extension of his body. Curiosity tugged at me, but I wasn't expecting anything more than maybe some receipts or gum wrappers. What I found instead was a folded manila folder with the Merrill and Carter logo on the front. It was thicker than the usual client files he kept around. I opened it and froze. Inside were printed screenshots, my social media posts, my texts with friends, clips of my Instagram stories, even the ones I'd posted years ago. Someone had gone through months of my digital life and highlighted random sections with yellow marker. Comments like "she seems stressed" or "rough day" were circled. Even jokes I'd made about being exhausted were underlined. And attached to the front was a typed note. This part hit hardest. Collecting behavioral patterns for documentation if needed. Not written by me, not written by Mark. It was signed, Jenna. My chest tightened so hard I thought I might get sick. She wasn't just sleeping with him. She wasn't just moving in with him. She was building a narrative about me. And it wasn't just any narrative. It was a case file, a pre-planned justification. A dossier meant to support exactly what he'd written on the divorce papers. Spouse's emotional instability. I sat down at the kitchen table, folder in hand, trying to steady my breathing. My first thought was that Mark had put her up to it, but then I noticed something else, a printed email thread. One from Mark, short and irritated. "We don't need that level of detail, stop obsessing." Another from Jenna. "I'm doing this for us, if she tries to take the house you'll thank me." And then something darker, "She's too comfortable. She won't see anything coming. We just have to make her look unpredictable. Trust me, trust me." 2 words that suddenly reframed everything. This wasn't just an affair. This wasn't just him planning an exit. This was her manipulating the entire situation, pushing him toward a divorce plan she was engineering piece by piece. I thought the betrayal stopped with the lease. I thought the twist was discovering he was ready to move out and paint me as unstable. But the real twist, the puppet strings weren't in Mark's hands, they were in hers. All those little behaviors I'd noticed, Mark acting confused, inconsistent, strangely hesitant, weren't signs of guilt. They were signs of someone being fed instructions, reassurances, and pressure. Jenna had her claws deeper than I realized. She didn't want to just steal my husband. She wanted to take my entire life apart, brick by brick. And worst of all, Mark didn't even seem to realize how manipulated he was. He thought he was in control. He thought he was being smart. He thought this plan was his. I closed the folder and felt a new kind of calm wash over me, colder than before. Cleaner, sharper. This wasn't going to be simple revenge anymore. This was going to be exposure. Because now I understood the truth. The real danger wasn't Mark. It was Jenna. And she had no idea what she had just triggered. I thought I understood the situation. I thought the villain was obvious. The affair, the apartment, the divorce papers. But none of that came close to the sickening truth I uncovered next. The truth about why Jenna was doing all of this. The cold, calculated reason behind every smile, every giggle, every little touch she shared with my husband like she had already won. It happened 2 days after I found the dossier. I was waiting outside Merrill and Carter in my car, watching employees filter out for lunch. I wasn't stalking, I was observing, documenting, preparing. But then I saw something that made my stomach flip. Jenna wasn't alone. She stepped out of the building with another woman, older, sharply dressed, the kind of woman who looked like she'd survived a dozen corporate wars and kept all the trophies. They walked together like they'd known each other for years, not months. They paused at the crosswalk, and the older woman touched Jenna's arm, saying something that made her nod eagerly. And that's when I recognized her. Her name was Bate Carver, senior partner, in charge of hiring, promotions, and project placements. And most importantly, the woman who handpicked Mark for every advancement he'd ever gotten at that company. I felt something cold trickle down my spine. I didn't know they even talked. So why were they suddenly acting like mother and daughter? I didn't get the answer until later that afternoon, when I walked into my lawyer's office to drop off the manila folder. She glanced through the pages, then stopped cold at one particular email, the one where Jenna wrote, "Bate said this is the cleanest route, you know she's right." My lawyer frowned. "Bate who?" I pointed to the name. Her face shifted instantly. "Oh," she said. "Her," she leaned back. "That woman is notorious. She's helped multiple male employees push their wives out during divorces, makes them look unstable so the men keep their assets. She calls it streamlining. It's disgusting." My heart started pounding. "Why would she help Jenna?" My lawyer hesitated. "Because Jenna is related to her." I blinked. "No, she can't be." "She is," my lawyer said. "Different last name, Jenna uses her mother's, but Bate is her aunt." A cold wave washed over me. Jenna wasn't some young assistant with a crush. She wasn't dazzled by an older man. She wasn't manipulated. She was placed, positioned, strategically inserted into Mark's orbit. And the worst part? The corporate world around them, everyone who knew Bates' reputation, probably assumed this was some kind of mentorship or upward mobility tactic. They had no idea she was helping her niece tear a marriage apart to secure Mark like he was a promotion she wanted Jenna to win. The reason finally hit me with full force. Jenna wasn't trying to steal my husband. She was trying to secure her future, Mark's promotion track, his salary, his connections, his potential partnership at Merrill and Carter. He wasn't a man to her. He was a career move, a stepping stone, a tool. And I was the obstacle that needed to be removed. Neatly, quietly, legally. That dossier, those highlighted social media posts, those emails, they weren't random. They were a coordinated plan between a seasoned manipulator and her protégé. A plan designed to destabilize me, make Mark believe I was the problem, and push me out before I even knew I was in a fight. The cruelty of it hit hard. They hadn't just betrayed me emotionally. They had stripped me down to a narrative, a character in their strategy, a problem to solve, a barrier to clear out of the way. I sat in my lawyer's chair, fists clenched, realizing I wasn't just fighting an affair. I was fighting a machine, a corporate predator and her ambitious niece, and they thought I was too blind and too trusting to ever understand what was happening. But I understood now, completely, and that clarity was lethal. Once I understood the full picture, Jenna's ambition, Bates' influence, their coordinated plan to push me out of my own life, I stopped thinking like a betrayed wife. I started thinking like someone preparing a controlled detonation. Quiet, deliberate, precise. My lawyer and I mapped out everything: the financial leverage, the documentation, the timeline. But the most important part wasn't legal, it was psychological. We needed them to feel safe right up until the floor dropped out from under them. So I played the part. For 2 full weeks, I acted exactly how they needed me to act. Calm, soft-spoken, a little tired, a little confused. The unstable wife they were hoping to shape. I didn't overdo it, I just gave them enough to reinforce their assumptions. And they bought it. Hard. Mark grew bolder, coming home later, texting in plain sight. Jenna started wearing bolder lipstick to work, like she already lived in that South End apartment. Bate walked around the office with this smug, plastic smile that made me want to put my fist through drywall. Perfect. The trap snapped shut on a Thursday afternoon. My lawyer filed for divorce first on my terms, not his. Full spousal support, half of all assets, the house in my name. And thanks to the evidence, it wasn't even a debate. The judge granted an emergency order freezing any attempt by Mark to alter financial accounts or transfer property. His little plan to sneak out with everything? Dead. But that wasn't the best part. The best part happened at Merrill and Carter. Remember that manila folder? The one Jenna created? The dossier she built behind my back with Bates' instructions? I gave copies to HR, not anonymously, not subtly, directly, in person. I walked into the building wearing the calmest expression of my life. HR met with me behind closed doors. I handed them the folder and said, "Your senior partner and her niece have been orchestrating a targeted campaign to destroy my reputation for personal gain. And they used company resources to do it." They didn't even blink. Because apparently, I wasn't the first complaint involving Bate, but I was the first with proof this detailed. They called Mark, Jenna, and Bate into separate conference rooms, while I sat in the lobby sipping a bottle of water like it was a front row seat to the end of their careers. Mark came out first, white-faced, trembling, eyes wide like he'd been slapped by reality. HR escorted him to gather his things. Administrative leave pending investigation. Not fired yet, but the shame in his eyes said everything. Then came Jenna. She wasn't crying. She was furious, red, shaking, trying to yank her badge from the HR rep's hand like she still had power. But she didn't, not anymore. She was escorted out of the building, humiliated, helpless, exactly the way she had planned to make me feel. And Bate, she didn't walk out. Security walked her out. Termination, effective immediately. Corporate predators fall the hardest when the people they underestimate fight back. Mark tried calling me later. 6 missed calls, 2 voicemails. I didn't listen. I didn't need to hear the panic, the regret, I didn't know what she was doing, please, we can fix this. He had chances to see the truth. He looked away every time. We finalized the divorce quickly after that. I kept the house. Half the savings, my dignity intact, and he kept, well, the consequences of his choices. The last time I saw him was outside the courthouse. He looked smaller, tired, lost. He opened his mouth like he wanted to say something profound. I just walked past him and said, "Enjoy apartment 712. I hear the walls are thin." That was my closure. And here's the kicker, the line I saved for myself. When they tried to break me, they forgot one thing: I don't crack, I shatter people.